Nzeogwu was a Sanos-trained officer. He was a most brilliant and much-loved cadet before he was commissioned. Later in his military career, he became the first Nigerian to be trained in military intelligence. My close association with him commenced from the moment that I arrived to be enlisted into the Nigerian Army. He received me warmly, taking me around the depot, showing me to all the warrant officers and young newly commissioned Nigerian officers. He introduced me as a former DO. The warrant officers were mainly northerners, and the description DO meant a lot to them, and indeed to other Nigerians, because only British civil servants and a few Nigerians rose to such posts in the pre-independence northern Nigeria, and it was still largely so in 1961. Chukwuma initiated me into the army, and I loved the way he did it, simplifying the strange military terms such as the enemy, moving targets, and the first LE, immediate action, and so on. He continuously assured me that every new step was extremely easy to take. He drilled me and taught me weapons handling personally. He then put his personal car at my disposal. Even though I was totally new in Zaria and had nowhere to go, still he came around and made sure that we went out together. Having departed for the UK, I did not meet Nzeogwu again until late 1962. By then, he was a staff officer at the army headquarters in Lagos. He visited me at Abeokuta, and we renewed our friendship very heartily and saw each other often until military duty separated us for a short while. Then in December 1963, I was posted to the 5th Battalion in Kaduna. A few months later, Nzeogwu was posted to the NMTC in Kaduna. We were both single officers. Before Nzeogwu arrived in Kaduna, I lived in the quarters meant for unmarried officers. I was sharing a 2-bedroom bungalow with Captain Olusegun Obasanjo, who, although married, lived without his wife at the time. He was away for some time, and Nzeogwu came and took over his room. Obasanjo was also Nzeogwu's friend, so that whenever he was around, he shared the same bed with Nzeogwu. At that time, Obasanjo was in the Nigerian Army Engineering Corps. He was a quiet, colorless, and easygoing officer who did not attract any personal recognition and would not be reckoned with as a revolutionary. His friendship with Nzeogwu derived mainly from the latter's ready friendliness towards all officers that were close to him. Living with Nzeogwu gave me a deep insight into his character. He was the son of a civil servant. His parents hailed from Asaba in the Midwest, but he was born in Kaduna, schooled there, and grew up there. He spoke Hausa very fluently, and he understood and had many Hausa traits. I knew him to be extremely straightforward, open-hearted, and open-handed. He spoke freely, hiding nothing. He gave generously. He was a good Christian and attended Mass regularly. Unlike most single officers, he did not go around with girlfriends. This surprised me, for although we both agreed that there was no question of getting married before the revolution, I did not subscribe to total abstinence. Nzeogwu was a good leader of men. The same could not be said of 90% of the officers. He drew the younger officers irresistibly to himself, endeavoring always to awaken them in both political and revolutionary consciousness, and above all, patriotism. He spoke amusingly, and all the young officers that had passed through his hands in the NMTC cherished him and held him in high esteem. Throughout 1965, Nzeogwu spoke freely and openly to some young officers about his intention to stage a revolution which would bring Nigeria to the path of greatness. All the young officers loved the idea and came closer to him. But the same could not be said of the middle level and senior officers, that is, majors, colonels, brigadiers, and above. By 1965, Nigeria had only one major general, that is J.T. Aguiyi Ironsi, the GOC of the army. There were 3 brigadiers, Ademulegun, Mai Malari, and Ogundikpe, 3 colonels, Adebayo, Ko Mohammed, and Shodeindi, and a few lieutenant colonels and many majors. The senior officers, that is colonels and above, were totally committed to the Balewa government and were preoccupied with sustaining Balewa in power and preserving themselves in the upper hierarchy of the army. When we labeled an officer as not being political, we meant that the officer did not understand the principles and practices of a political army. We did not imply that the officer did not understand the Nigerian political game of you chop, I chop, or you wash my hands and I wash your hands, or he is my brother and I must support him, and so on. Of the lieutenant colonels, only 2 were known to be political and revolutionary and were willing to take part in any efforts to revolutionize Nigeria. These were Lieutenant Colonels Banjo and Fadri. For reasons that are later explained, neither of them actually took part in the coup of January 15th. Lieutenant Colonels Ojukwu and Nzeogwu were unsure and preferred to adopt the "if you boys succeed, we shall go along with you" attitude. The others were committed to the Balewa government like their senior ranks. One of them, Lieutenant Colonel Lagama, who was then commanding the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, was known to be publicly associated with the Akintola government and taught the Premier and his ministers the use of fighting weapons like rifles and submachine guns. The majors were a mixed grill, many of them non-revolutionary and indifferent. Majority of them were committed through the allegiance to specific senior officers to the Balewa government, so that only a handful were revolutionary and willing to take part in changing the order of things. This few actually took part in the coup. I had earlier related my first meeting with Lieutenant Ifeajuna in the days prior to my enlistment into the army, that is, at the time I went before the selection board. Then we reached the conclusion that it was the military that was likely to provide the ultimate solution to the Nigerian political problems. We bore this in mind and did not have to reconsider the matter. It was always a question of when the hour comes. In December 1963, when we were together in Kaduna, Ifeajuna and I moved closer to each other and discussed vital political, intellectual, and revolutionary matters. Since Ifeajuna's wife was not around at the time, he lived in the single officer's quarters so that we were together most of the time. Unlike Nzeogwu, Ifeajuna was a relatively quiet and more secretive personality with a rather complicated character. On the one hand, he was intensely political and revolutionary. On the other, he was not very open-hearted and did not naturally attract many young officers to himself. Nevertheless, he was very influential among the ones that were close to him. Like Nzeogwu, Ifeajuna was open-handed, generous, and willing to sacrifice anything for the revolution. But at the same time, he always wanted to be in the good books of the senior officers in order to ensure his promotion in any events. These conflicting desires often clashed with him, making him inconsistent and at times unreliable. Like Nzeogwu, I believe that a revolutionary had to be single-minded and devoted to his ideals in complete disregard of his personal fortunes and safety. Ifeajuna left Kaduna for India late in April 1964, and when he returned later that year, he was posted to Lagos as the brigade major of the 2nd Brigade based at Apapa. It was not until I moved down to Abeokuta in September 1965 that we got close touch with each other again. Captain Christian Anoforo was one of the best officers of the Nigerian Army. He went to Sandos and was commissioned in 1960. My first intimate knowledge of him started in Kaduna in 1964 when he was commanding the newly formed Reconnaissance Squadron. He had a highly affable and warm personality. His sight was quick and penetrating. When Anoforo spoke, he was incisive, direct, yet humorous. He was a soldier of great courage and a very reliable friend. When we were together in Kaduna, we shared games and social activities. When we discussed politics, one could see that he knew his subject very well and we always agreed. I left Anoforo in Kaduna in December 1964. When I returned there in July 1965, he had left for Pakistan. He returned in October 1965 and was posted to the General Staff Branch, Army HQ, Lagos. By that time, I was in Abeokuta and we met often. Another shining light in the Nigerian Army was Captain Timothy Onwatuegu. He was the adjutant of the 5th Battalion. When I joined that unit in December 1963, Onwatuegu was a brilliant cadet at Sandos and the first Nigerian to be made a junior under-officer in that world-famous institution. He was unmarried when we first met and we shared the mess life together. A Roman Catholic, he was active and could hardly be faulted in military duties. Because he was humble, senior officers found him useful, loyal, and dependable. At the same time, junior officers found it easy to work with him. He made himself like one of them. He was later posted to NMTC and worked under Nzeogwu before I joined that unit in July 1965. Like any other young officer around Nzeogwu, his political ideas were soon formed and straightened with revolutionary principles. Major Donatus Okafor was an officer commissioned from the ranks and was therefore not really revolutionary. He was brought in mainly because of the appointment which he held throughout 1965 and until January 15, 1966, than for his revolutionary ideals and practices. This did not imply that an officer from the ranks could not be revolutionary or political. He could be. Only he would be a reb. Lieutenant Colonel Fajui was like that. He was revolutionary, political, and intensely patriotic. But then Lieutenant Colonel Fajui was an extremely brave soldier, which was why he won the Military Cross Award for an act of exemplary bravery during his service with the United Nations in Congo. Donatus Okafor was not exactly like that. He was neither a revolutionary nor an idealist. He was a rough-hewn, as a matter of fact. My close association with him started in March 1965 when we attended a Battle Group Commander's course at the School of Infantry, Warminster, UK. The two of us were the only Nigerians on the course, and so we came together and compared notes. By the time we finished at Warminster, we had close rank as a great deal, and later in the year, when he was brought into our revolutionary movement, I was inclined to accept him because of the experiences we had shared. Major Humphrey, who with me survived the Civil War, was a Sandos trained officer. He was commissioned in 1960. Of the 7 majors who eventually took part in the coup, he was the only one with whom I had no prior association. But unlike the others, he was the only one with whom I associated longest after the coup. He was also the only one with whom I shared the experiences of the Midwest War. It was during this time that I really came to know more about him than I did before the coup. Humphrey was a resolute soldier. He was plain, frank, devoted, and reliable. He had neither the decisiveness of Anuforo nor the untiring endurance of Nzeogwu. Nevertheless, he was active and quietly determined. Politically, he was resolutely clung to revolutionary ideals and practices. By late 1965, Humphrey was working in the A branch of the Army headquarters in Lagos. It was during this time that we associated together in preparation for the coup. Today, if one were to ask when did the coup for the revolution really begin, the most accurate answer would be from 1961, because the 3 of us who formed the nucleus of the revolutionary group had met in that year. Although we had not there and then planned the revolution, we had seen eye to eye and we knew that we had a common cause. It was as if the seed was sown at that time and only needed time to germinate, grow, and bear fruits. But these meetings were between Ifeajuna and me on one hand and between Nzeogwu and me on the other. This pattern remained almost the same throughout. It was in mid-November 1965 that we held the one and only formal meeting that preceded the coup. The meeting was held in Lagos in the military quarters of Major Ifeajuna. Nzeogwu was there from Kaduna and I from Abeokuta. Major Chude Soke was there from Enugu. Others were from Lagos, that is Okafor of the Federal Guards Company, and Nuforo and Chukwuka from the Army headquarters. The meeting was very short. There was a consensus among us that something had to be done quickly to save Nigeria from anarchy and disintegration and to restore peace and unity to the nation.
Well, now that you're here, I think we can all proceed.
Good to see you could all make it. The revolution has begun.
Now, gentlemen, we all know why we are here. It's because of the state of the nation. Insecurity is at its critical level, and it is evident that we no longer have the luxury of time. The revolution must happen sooner than we thought.
I agree with you, Chukwuma. The state of the country has gone from bad to chaotic in a matter of months. There's confusion everywhere.
So, what are you proposing we do, sir? And do we have a definite D-Day?
Not yet, but that is why we are here. But one thing is for certain, that by the end of this meeting, every single man in this room would have had a specific role on how to proceed with the operation. We have been talking, we have been planning, and we have been preparing. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to liberate our country from these political jobbers. Now is the time to free this country from the grip of these so-called politicians. Now is the time to free this country from corruption and economic robbery.
From a system where 99% of the people are poor and 1% control all the wealth.
Where regional governments now use the army to fight its own people. I agree. We must act fast.
Given the new exigencies, our only option is the use of maximum force to exert sanity where and when necessary.
Any obstacle capable of derailing the revolution must be crushed by any means necessary.
The country is already in a state of anarchy, Chris. You saw for yourself what the Sardauna ordered the army to do to those thief people. Is that the kind of person you want to be diplomatic with? Be reasonable. But at this point, what are our options? Watch the country go up in flames because of the greed of a few men? I say we do what needs to be done.
Gentlemen, I believe we're on the same track here. But I must agree with Major Chris here. We must be seen to be more superior than these bloody politicians who go around killing their own people.
We are at war, gentlemen. Nobody brings a knife to a gunfight. Nobody.
We'll stick to the original plan. All political leaders and the military collaborators are to be arrested. And when arrest is resisted, it must be met with maximum force. I'm sure that is clear enough.
Yes.
Go. Wally, can you please give us a brief on our targets?
This is the list of our targets for immediate arrest at the HR. The mission is to arrest all of them, along with their right-hand men. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Samuel Ladoke Akintola, Dennis Chukwude Osadebe, Michael Ihonukara Okpara.
And in the army, our target are Major General J.T. Nrosi, the two brigade commanders, Brigadier Samuel Ademu Legun and Brigadier Mai Malari Zakaria, Colonel Koa Muhammad, Lieutenant Colonel James Pam, Colonel Raf Shodeinde, and of course the most political officer in the army, Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagama, Commander 4th Battalion, Ibadan.
At H hour, we will strike simultaneously from all regional headquarters. I will head operations in the northern region, Ima. You will run operations in Lagos with Chuka and Okafo. Wally, you will cover the rest of the western region, and since we don't have troops stationed in Benin, we will send a small unit from Enugu.
By the time the revolution is successful, every officer Odin joined will regret.
That's right. After dissolving the regions, we will create 14 new states that will be governed strictly by the military governors who supported the revolution.
History will write about us. and our timely intervention that saved Nigeria.
What if we fail?
What did you say?
What if the operation fails? I mean, we've gone over these plans for months now. But one thing we have never planned is an exit strategy. Chukuma, you know me. I'm a realist, not a pessimist. Yes, we have our rules. And we all know the objectives of the revolution. But gentlemen, you also know that an operation plan is not complete without a contingency. Has any one of you thought of what will happen? What will happen to us? To our families? In fact, to the entire country? So I ask again.
But in 1519, Captain Cortes Hernandez took on the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula with 10 boats and 600 men. This seemed like a suicide mission, given that the captain was relatively inexperienced. Upon arrival, he wanted to make sure that his men were 100% committed to nothing but victory. So he gave the order to burn down the ships, the only means of getting them. That would leave them with two options: death or victory. 2 years after his arrival, Captain Cortes became the first man in 6 centuries to conquer Mexico. We are not soldiers of occupation, Major Okafor. We are revolutionaries. And our cause is bigger than any individual. We are going to take back power from this bunch of corrupt politicians. We are going to break the systematic form of capitalism. We are going to change the course of this country forever. In the end, posterity will be the best job. But the only way we can succeed is if we are willing to lose everything, including our very own life. There is no contingency, gentlemen. We burnt our ship a long time ago. This may be the last time we get to sit and plan like this before the D-Day. If anybody has anything to say. Now.
You can count on me, sir.
We are all in.
coup now begins to look more and more like a straightforward military revolt against corruption in government, and one that's likely to last. It has popular backing. What's not so clear is who its real backers are. The man at present being put forward is the army commander, General Agui Ironsi, who arrived at the heavily guarded Parliament buildings to hold the new administration's first press conference.
Major Nzeogwu, can you please give me an account of the night of the coup in Kaduna?
Well, it's rather something like the longest day. We started this off on the night of the 13th of January, when a night exercise was planned by the military college, which I command. We took our troops to the ground and taught them how to do night attack. We didn't tell them what we were planning for, but at the end of the exercise we took them out and showed them various places where they were to stand.
Permanent secretaries in charge of federal ministries will continue in their office, carrying out the normal functions of government, and they shall be directly responsible to the federal military government when constituted.
Now, what are your relations with General Ironsi in Labour?
Well, very good. He's my boss. I've always been under him, and I still am under him. There isn't really any problem. A few misunderstandings arose, but this was due to the publication in the press and by announcements over the radio.
My main concern